Okay, we are now being recorded. So we are up to the Mishnah all the way at the bottom of Daf Ayin Tes Amud Beis. We actually learned the Mishnah, but we might as well refresh our memories. So someone had a woman brought a field in to a marriage, and the husband invested. Let's say he put $100,000 of improvements into the field. He fertilized it, he weeded it, he aerated it, and finally, when he was going to see some yield, he took some fruits, he got a little bit of yield, and unfortunately, their marriage broke up. So he maybe made back $100 from the $100,000 investment that he made. Can he recoup his investment? How do we deal with his investment? Or or on the flip side, if he didn't invest too much, but he did end up benefiting from a great yield, the halacha is masha hoitzi hoitzi umasha achalacha. There is no reconciliation. Whatever he was fortunate enough to enjoy, he enjoyed. But the relationship is severed and everything stops where it is. So whatever he benefited, and he doesn't get any more. So he's basically losing his investment. But if he didn't benefit even in iota, then yishva kama hoitzi. Then he swears how much it is that he benefited, and he's entitled to get that back. Why does he swear? Because no one could contradict him. She doesn't know how much he spent. So we make him swear, verify exactly his expenses. He could show all his Home Depot receipts, and then he could collect that back.
Even over and above of what he took out.
No, he could only take out what he put in. You can't take out more than he put in. But we're going to see there's even limitations to that, and we'll see that soon. So this is a very fascinating Mishnah, because this Mishnah is really telling us how the Chachamim set up how the Nichsei Malug works. And they set it up such that when a person is investing in his wife's property, he's not doing it for the benefit of his wife. He's doing it for his own benefit. He wants to have a better yield from the property. And if his wife should pass away sometime down the line, he's going to inherit from her an improved property. So he's doing it for himself. Since he's doing it for himself, if the investment goes sour because his marriage terminates, then he loses. It's business. You win a few, you lose a few. And he didn't invest for her good. He invested for his good, and it didn't work out for him, so he does not get to recover any of the funds. However, if he got nothing back, then he didn't. That means he did it for his wife. That means he didn't, even though he intended to get for himself, but that wasn't his das. So therefore, he can at least reclaim what he spent. So where did the Rabbanan get this structure from, and why did they set it up this way? So there's a fascinating Meshech Chochmah on Parshas Re'eh, and he quotes a Rambam in Hilchos Avodim. In Parshas Re'eh, the Torah talks about when you free a Neved, you have to give him Hanaka, you have to give him severance. And there's a fascinating Rambam there and a fascinating Meshech Chochmah. But before I say the Meshech Chochmah, the Briskerov once said that there were 4 people who lived in the 1800s, who the goal in their Svarim that they wrote was to illustrate how all of the Kanas Chachamim is based on the Torah. And they were really trying to counteract the Reform movement by showing and explaining the halachas of the Torah, and showing that even the Rabbanim halachas are also rooted in the Chumash, in the Torah. So the Rambam over here on Hilchos Avodim says that there are many reasons why an Eved goes free. If the Adon dies and he has no sons, if 6 years come, if Yovel comes, and the Rambam says, what happens if a person had an Eved that was ill, that was sick, and he spent thousands of dollars in trying to heal this Eved, and he did, and then the Eved goes free because one of these reasons occurred, he could not reclaim even 1 penny of the money that he invested in this Eved in the refuah. But of course, on the flip side, what if someone is generous and he sees someone is sick and he offers to pay all of that person's medical expenses? Or if someone is in captivity and he pays the ransom, when that person comes out of jail, when that person gets healed, he actually has a chiyuv to pay back. What's the difference between the eved and the stranger? The answer is simple. When he helped the stranger, he was doing it to help the stranger. That's money that he'll recoup. But when he paid for the healing of the eved, he wasn't doing that to help the eved. He was doing that to help himself because he wanted a good eved that he would benefit from. And the Torah says, "V'yotzachidum ein kosaf," and we dash from ein kosaf is that he doesn't even get to reclaim and recover the expenses that he incurred that he didn't benefit from because the eved walked free. Zokta Meshech Chochma, this is the makor to this halacha. When you're spending money on your own behalf, that's an investment that you don't have a right to reclaim. And that's where Zokta Meshech Chochma, this comes from. That's where this halacha comes from in our Mishnah, that when you spend money to improve a field that belongs to your wife, that's nichsim alug, if you don't end up recovering anything from it other than just a little bit, you've lost your investment. So that was a very interesting thought. So Frek the Gemara, v'chamo kimo, we say that if the husband had some minimal benefit from his investment, that's enough to say that he can no longer claim back his expenses. Omer Abasi, afilu geroi gerois achas. Even if he ate one fig that was produced through his improvements, that's enough that he could no longer claim back his expenses. But it's only behusha akol derech koved. If he sat down by the table with a fork and knife and he ate it properly, that's when it's called eating enough to be able to say that he benefited from it. But if he just grabbed a fig off the tree in passing while he was working, where it wasn't kavua, that's not called enough of a hana to say that he's forfeited his investment. Omar Rebbe said that it's actually a different amount. And let's go turn over onto Daf Pei Amud Aleph, which is where we're up to, which is today's Daf. Rabbi Abba says, Beirav, in the name of the house of Rav, Afilu Shigur the Tamri, which Rashi says even crushed pressed dates. Rashi has it shver because dates are worth more than figs. So, Frek Rashi, what is Rabbi Abba adding? Afilu Shigur the Tamri, even dates. If figs are considered hana, surely dates are considered hana. So Rashi wants to suggest that maybe you have to flip it around. And Rabbi Abba's halacha was first shigur the tamri, and only then did Rabbi Asi say even figs. But Tosfos says that's not shver. If we look at the third line of Tosfos, the like Amar afilu tamri ala shigra, meaning sure an individual date is for sure more valuable than an individual fig, but a crushed date, a squeezed date, is worth less than a fresh fig. And that's why it's a filo sugar the tamari, even a crest date. Boy Rav Bibi, chufta the tamri mai. What if it was chufta the tamri, which Rashi has two pshatim? Either it's after you squeezed out dates to make beer with the leftover pulp, that's what we're talking about, or mash of the date that you're using to ferment for beer. Mai, that even on a lesser level, would that be considered having hana from this investment? Dr. Gemara take what the Gemara does not. What happens if it's lo yachol derech chavod? He ate a fig, but he didn't eat a derech chavod. So one fig not derech chavod is not considered having hana. How much would he have to eat not derech chavod to be considered that he had enough hana that he forfeits his investment? What's the halacha? Amar ula pligi ba trei amiroy b'marav. Two amiroy b'marav had a dispute about how much you'd have to eat. One says the value of an isser. The chadamar bechedinner, you have to eat the value of a dinner, which was considerably more. Amri Dayani de Pumbedisa. The Dayanim of Pumbedisa said, and the Gemara Sanhedrin tells us whenever Gemaras use these phrases like Dayani de Pumbedisa, it's actually referring to someone specific. Dayani de Pumbedisa, Rashi says, is referring to Rav Papa bar Shmuel. So Rav Papa bar Shmuel said over a story. Avad Rav Yehuda Ovdu bechavilas muris. Rabbi Yehuda had a case where all the husband benefited, not even from the fruit, he took the stalks, not even the fruit, but the stalks from the plant, and he fed those to his animal. And Rabbi Yehuda considered that enough, hana, that the husband forfeited his investment. Now, if you don't even eat the fruit, you're just eating the stalks, is that actually having a no? Is that actually benefiting and using the plants? Rabbi Yehuda, we see elsewhere, holds that even if you don't eat the fruit, you just benefited from the stalks, that's also considered having a benefit. The Rabbi Yehuda said as follows. Now we know there's halacha, if you buy a field from somebody else, you have to hold on to your star so that he can't come and say, I never sold you the field. But how long do you have to hold on to your star for? The halacha is you have to hold on to your star for 3 years. If 3 years go by and no one was ma'ar on your field, no one came and made a claim against your field, then you no longer have to hold on to your star. So that means now, after those 3 years, if someone comes and says that field is mine, I can say, no, you have to prove that it's yours, because once I'm in there for 3 years without a complaint, clearly it belongs to me. But that's only if I'm in the field and I'm benefiting from the field the way an owner would benefit from the field. Because someone would only be ma'ar if I'm playing owner, if I'm acting like a balabos. If I'm acting like a guest there, there's no reason for them to come and be ma'ar. So what would be the case? One of the years of Chazakah, the fruits were arla. Arla are aser bana, you can't eat it. Shvius, anybody can eat from the field on Shvius. The fact that you're eating there doesn't show that you're an owner. Or Klein, you're eating, again, iser, no. Harezeh Chazakah, that's still a Chazakah. It's still showing ownership, even though you're eating these things. Why? Why is that? Zokt Rashi, Achla, so it's about 3 inches down, about 2 inches down in the Rashi, Achla Lekeach, Shnei Orla. When did Lekeach eat in this property to show his bias, to exhibit his bias? Is he ate during the Orla season? She'ein Hana Asan El Bizmuras. No, surely he couldn't eat pears. Pears are usher to eat. So what he did was he must have had Hana. He must have benefited from the stalks, because by Arla, pre-Asr Bahano, the fruits Asr Bahano, but not the stalks. Or Shvius, or if it was Shmidish or Hefker, or Shazara Klayim, or he planted Klayim where the fruits Asr, but Vazimura Islay Nesru, the whole plant is not Asr, only the fruits are Asr, the stalks are Mutter. Merely using the stalks is enough of a display of ownership that it's called the Chazakah. So you see, eating stalks is called exhibiting ownership, displaying ownership. So there's a certain no there. So by the same token, over here, if a husband only had enough of the stalks of a plant, that would be considered enough to say that he's forfeited his investment. So back to the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Chisda, when one marries a katana who's not really married to midaraisa, if she was a Yosoima and her mother or her brothers married her off, this is a girl who can terminate the marriage at her whim at any moment. She can walk away. So what incentive do you have to invest money in a field that this woman brought into your marriage when you know you could lose your investment on her whim in a nanosecond? So the halacha is there we make a special treatment for this husband. And we treat it it's as if someone invited you to do improvements in this field, where he surely has to pay you for the improvements. Why would we make this different? My time of Rabbanon, if he had to be concerned that at any moment he can get thrown out of the field, he's just going to grab from the field whatever and never improve it. And he'll actually cause damage to the field, because he'll just be sucking out without doing any benefit. And the reason why he doesn't want to benefit the field is because he might lose his investment. She can just on a whim walk out. So for him to make a special takana to incentivize him to improve the field, they told him that whatever you put in, you're going to get out. And therefore, he'll take very good care of the field. Because if he ends up remaining with her, he'll benefit from it. And even if she walks out, at least he's still guaranteed to be protected and be able to recover his investment. I have a very rich uncle. He's not alive anymore. My wife had an uncle who used to own the biggest bank on the West Coast. He owned a bank called Columbia Savings and Loans. At one point, that was the biggest bank on the West Coast. And what took his bank down was that he was very close with Michael Milken, and he had a very big portfolio of junk bonds, which had he held on to, would have catapulted him to a new level of wealth. They were very successful junk bonds. But there was a scare, and the government mandated that he liquidate the junk bonds immediately. And since he had to make a fire sale, he lost everything. But that's not the point of the story. One day, we're struggling, a new couple. We get a notice from UPS that there's a package from my rich uncle waiting for us at customs, but we have to pay $100 customs fee. It reminds me of all the emails you get about some relative, some great uncle that died in South Africa somewhere. And if you give him $5,000, then they'll be able to unleash the $500 million Yerusha on you. So I'm getting this letter from UPS. So of course I paid the $100. A day later, a big box gets delivered to my house. I think about why couldn't he just send me a check in an envelope? Why did he have to send me cash in a box? I open up the box and it's full of his wife's old shoes from the 60s. And I said, oh my God, I paid $100 for this. And it tossed it straight into the garbage. And I don't even think the Bata Shoe Museum wanted it. So I felt quite foolish. So look at this story in the Gemara. Ahi Itza, the Naflu law, Arba Meyazuzi. She had a Yerusha. He was told that in a faraway land, she got the same email we all get, that in a faraway land, there's a big Yerusha waiting for her. Bechuzoi, in the city of Bechuzoi. So she told her husband, my dear husband, can you go pick up this big jackpot for me? Also, Gavra, apparently they probably didn't know what it was till they got there, because her husband ended up spending just to get there to pick it up. He actually had to spend 600 dinar to pick up the 400. He felt exactly like I felt when the UPS box arrived. I see Arba Meya, and he was now coming back with the 400. I'm not sure if it was Zuz, if it was dinner, whatever it was, Shkolim, Shloim. And what happens? V'hadu de Kaasi, on his way home, he needed money. V'shako minai, when he took from the 400, which means he had enough from his investment. And after all that hard work, he comes home. His wife says, "I don't want you anymore." So he did all the hard work. He did all his hard work on behalf of his wife's nefkasim. Of course, he's doing it because he feels he's going to benefit. And then he comes home and his wife gives him a divorce, or demands a divorce. Now he wants to retrieve his $600 back that he spent to get her 400. So they came to Rabami. Amarlai, he told him, well, you had a no, you had benefit from the shvach, that one zuz that you took to buy yourself a sandwich in the airport for $4,000, because that's what the prices are in the airport. Masha hoitzi, umasha ochal. Too bad, you lose. Amru leRabban leRabami. The Rabban told Rabami, why would you pass him that way? If he ate it, if he invested that 400 and he took some of the profits from the investment of the 400, yes, that would be called having a no from his investment. But how kind of he was eating the carrot. That shouldn't be considered eating shvach, which would then make him forfeit his investment. That's number one. Number two, he didn't buy a sandwich in the airport. If you look into it, you will see that he was bringing, he had a carry-on baggage that he had to cash in, and they charged him extra for the carry-on. So he was paying, that money that he spent was actually part of the expense to retrieve the money. So Rabbi said, oh, I didn't know all the facts. And came, that's a case of someone who expensed money, he spent money, but he didn't benefit from it. And then all he has to do is swear how much he spent, and then he could reclaim the money. So it's very interesting. What did Ramami think at the beginning? He must have thought that he took the money for a sandwich. So this reminds us of Mar Ukva. Remember, Mar Ukva always said, "Ain mali easy, you can't pass it so quickly. You first have to get down and drill down into all the details of the story, because once you get the details clear, the psak can drastically change." So the law is he swears how much he spent, and that's what he can collect. So there's a very interesting Tosfos over here. Tosfos has a beautiful kasha. We know that midaraisa, there's no such thing as making a shvuah to collect. You're always making a shvuah to protect yourself from having to pay. For instance, someone goes over to you and says, "You owe me $1,000," and you respond, "I don't owe you 1,000. I only owe you 500." So that's moed b'miktas. So there, you're mechuyit to swear that you don't owe me more than 500. So you're swearing, not that because you're going to collect, you're swearing to avoid having to pay. That's a shvuah deraisa. Another example of a shvuah deraisa is an erecha. I say you owe me $1,000, and I have one aid saying that you owe me $1,000. I don't have two aidim. I only have one aid. Again, you have to swear that you don't owe me the money. So whenever you find a shvuah that's deraisa, it's always nishba v'loy mishali. Midarabanan, the Rabbanan made a whole bunch of cases where you're nishba v'noitel. And an example of that case is, there's two examples I'll give you, but there's many examples. One example is, you have someone who employs 100 people, and one of his employees come over to him and says, "Yaakov, you didn't pay me this week." He says, "What are you talking about? Of course I paid you this week." And he said, "No, I didn't." We trust, even though normally say we trust the poil. Why? Because he only knows about his paycheck. But the owner has to keep track of 100 paychecks. So because of that, we say that the memory of the worker regarding his paycheck would be more accurate than the memory of the employer, and therefore the worker can swear that he didn't receive payment yet and collect. That's a derabanan. Another case was, if someone goes over to a chenveni and he gives the chenveni $100, and he tells the chenveni, or he didn't give the chenveni, he told the chenveni, "I want you to give this fellow $100 worth of food, and I'll pay you." And then the chenveni comes and tells him, "Okay, I gave the guy the food, please pay me." And then the guy who was supposed to get the food comes to him and says, "I didn't get the food." So the chenveni says, "I paid, I gave him the food, pay me." And the person who was supposed to receive the food said, "Never got it." So the halacha is, they each have to swear that the money is coming to them, and the balabais have to pay both of them. So these are two examples. The Frek Tosfos. So let's look at the Tosfos Yishava Kama Hotzvito. The Ferish Rabbeinu Chananel Makshin, Rabbeinu Chananel asked the following question: Amai loitana hai nishpa v'noitel v'hadi nishpa v'noitel d'shvus. We're soon going to learn Masechet Shvus, and there's a Mishnah Masechet Shvus. It's a long Mishnah that says this is a list of all the Derabanan Shvus where you're nishpa v'noitel, and it lists up a whole bunch of the Shvus, amongst them the ones that I listed. But for some reason, it didn't mention our case that a husband that spends money on the wife's field swears to reclaim what he spent. Why isn't this item, our Gemara, also in that list in Masechet Shvus? Umeshani, Rabbeinu Chananel answered, in those cases, the only type of cases that the Mishnah there discusses are cases where there's an opponent who's denying it. So, for instance, the soicher, the worker, the schir is coming and saying you didn't pay, and the balabais is saying I did pay. So, when there's an opponent making a direct claim against you, there you need to swear. But in our case, she's not denying anything. She agrees he improved my field. She just doesn't know how much he spent. So there's no one opposing him. Those aren't the type of shvuas that the Mishnah there is discussing. But Tosfos gives some more insight. Beautiful. What would be, in either case, in our case, we have at the corner, he makes a shvua and he could reclaim his investment. In the Mishnah there, the soicher, the schir, the worker makes a shvua that he didn't receive payment and he collects payment. What would be if the Rabbanan didn't get involved? In our case, if the Rabbanan didn't get involved, the husband would be able to claim his money. In that case, if the Rabbanan didn't get involved, the schir would be out of luck because Hamotzi Mechavere Olav Haraya. Zok Tosfos, in that Mishnah, it's only listing of things where it's nishpa v'noipel. If it wasn't for the Chachamim, the guy would be out of luck and he wouldn't be able to collect. The takana is that he can take, but he has to make a shvua. Our Mishnah is discussing a completely different thing. He can take anyway because he spent the money and there's no one opposing him. The takana is that he has to swear. The Mishnah is only discussing takanas where he would otherwise not be able to take, and we're finding a way for him to take. Therefore, it doesn't mention our shvua in the Mishnah and shvua. Just an interesting factoid to know the difference between our shvua, which is just a shvua to make him swear to clarify what he's entitled to, even though be'etzim we would trust him anyway. Okay. Give me one moment because Chaim Fear is calling, so he probably wants to join the shir and he doesn't know what we're on. Chaim, we are on 1948. Yeah, because the Neil Finkel is giving share on 7613. The Neil Finkel is saying share on 7613. So come join us. Yeah, so we're on 1948. Yeah. Okay, we'll see you soon. Okay, so Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Yeshova kama hoitzi v'yito. Amar Rabasi. Rabasi said, V'hu sheyesh shvach keneged hoitzo. Rabasi said something that's very unclear. Where you swear and then you take, that's only if the property improved at least the value that I spent. So Rashi tells us this statement could mean one of two things. It could either mean that when you have to swear, that's only if you want to claim more expenses than you improve the field. The field only benefited 1,000, but you spent 10,000. You want to claim more money from her than you actually benefited. There you have to swear. But what if the field improved at 50,000 and you only put in 40,000 of an investment? There you don't have to swear. Since the money's there, the improvement's there, then you could collect without even swearing. That's one option of how we could understand Rabasi. But there's another option of how we could understand Rabasi. And that is, you have to swear no matter what. But even if you swear, we won't let you collect more than the amount that you benefited the field, which works against you. So is Rabasi saying something that helps the husband, or is Rabasi saying something that makes it more strict for the husband? Exactly what did Rabasi mean to say? Omar Abaye takes one position where it's better for the husband. Shem hoyer shvach yeser al hoitzah. If the shvach was greater than the hoitzah, if the shvach was more than the hoitzah, we are on daf pei amar aleph. We're about halfway down. So if the shvach was greater than the hoitzah, he spent 50,000 and the field benefited by 100,000. Noitelas hoitzah below shvuah. There, the husband can take whatever he claims he invested without even swearing. Amalei Rava told the buyer, I don't think that what you're saying is right. Because imagine the shvach was 100,000 and he invested 110,000. Really, he should have to swear. But what he'll do is he'll underestimate he'll understate, he'll underclaim, and he'll say, I only improved it by 99,000, so that he can avoid making a shvuah. We don't want that to happen. Therefore, it's not likely that Rav Asi says what you meant. I'll tell you what Rav Asi meant. Rav Asi meant to the Chumrah. If you spent more money, you invested 100,000, but you only improved the karka by 50,000, then ein loy ela hitzah shir shvach. The maximum you're allowed to claim from what you invested was how much the property actually improved. And even that amount, uvishvua, you'd have to swear for. So that's how the Gemara seems to remain, halacha l'maisa, that you always have to swear, the husband always has to swear no matter what, but even with the shvua, his claim is limited to the amount of benefit the field had. Iboilu. What happens if you have a husband who didn't improve the field himself, rather, Baal Shahorid a recent tachtov? The husband subcontracted the improvement of the field. He hired an artist. So normally an artist improves the field and he gets paid from the improvement. He gets a portion of the improvement, 25%, 30%, whatever it is that he gets for improving the field. But here, she didn't hire the artist. He hired the artist. And then, before they had a chance to collect on the field, the marriage broke down. And now the husband has no money with which to pay the artist because he got cut out of the field. So do you say that when the artist took on the job, died to the Baal Nochis, he was relying on the Baal. Istolak le Baal, since the Baal got kicked out, is Talikalahu, they get kicked out as well. So you might ask, I don't understand. Why can't the artist make a claim from the Baal? Sure, you don't have access to the field anymore, but we worked for you. You still owe us money. So Tosfos explains that when you work for a husband, when an artist works for a husband, you're taking upon yourself automatically that risk that if he gets thrown out, you will not get paid. And you know that because you're working for a husband. So is that the halacha that the artist is out? Idilma adai to the iron office. When the artist went down, they were never intending to be working for the husband. They were working for the property, for the wife. The Iraq Hikaimo. Larisi Kaima. And the land is still there, the land improved, so the Aris could make the claim from the wife. That was the child. Is the Aris's claim only with the husband, because that's what their understanding was when they made their agreement, or is it with the wife? Direct I don't understand. Even if it was with the husband, they should still have a claim on the property. Why? Because my shna what if you just go into your friend's field without any permission? He didn't invite you, and you improve the field. You're entitled to a claim on him. And the law is shaman light. They assess how much you improve the field. They look at your expenses, and you get the lesser of the two. So they look at it. Let's say they improve the field by 100,000. It only costs them 50,000. So the person who did that improvement will get 50,000. What if it cost him 50,000, but it only improved it by 25,000? Then he gets 25,000, but he gets something. So these are reasons, even if they were working with the husband, why don't they have a claim against the wife for at least the lesser of the two, their cost, or at least what it improved the value? Dr. Gemara, I'll tell you why. Because Hasdam leko inish the Torah. Where this person went into his friend's field, that field was being left fallow. Nobody was working the field. So when I went into the field and I improved it, even though I didn't have permission to do that, and I wasn't invited to do that, but I benefited the owner of the field. Haka, here the wife will say, you always didn't do me any favor. I would have much rather that my husband didn't subcontract to work, that my husband did not subcontract to work. I would have been happier if he did the work himself. Because if he did the work himself, I'll kick him out and I don't got to give him a penny. Now that you did it, you're making it worse for me because now you're forcing me to pay it. So since you didn't do me a favor, you have no claim on me. So my Habi Allah, what in fact did we paskin? Amar Rabbi Shua, the Zinon you see. Ibal or so if the husband is a do-it-yourselfer and he can watch YouTube videos and go to Home Depot and learn how to plow his field, so then he could have done it himself. So therefore, istalak lebal istalkaluhu. Since he was thrown out, she doesn't have to pay the aris because the aris didn't benefit her in any way. Because it's better for her if her husband would have done the work. But ibal labarisu, if the husband was incapable of processing this field, so his wife knew that he would have had to hire an aris. So now the aris is benefiting the wife as well, and therefore ara larisi kaim. And so it's very interesting. You see here that depending on what his understanding, what the aris's understanding was, that would impact what his contract is and whether or not he can collect. I want to share with you two stories. First of all, there's a lot of yored l'soich sadeh chaveri shaloi midaitoi. You're entitled to the lesser of the two, either your expenses or if you benefited. So I actually had a din Torah with someone who ripped me off, and this was exactly the psak halacha. It was a cold February night, and someone who never ever took care of his boilers in his apartment buildings called me in an emergency that his boiler isn't working. I get to the boiler, and the entire boiler was destroyed. And I told him, you need a $20,000 repair. He needed to retube his boiler, which was a $20,000 repair. And I told him that even after you do this repair, you're going to have to throw your boiler out come the spring. This will just get you through to the spring. Actually, it wasn't $20,000. I told him it's going to cost you between $3,000 and $7,000. But the $3,000 to $7,000 that you're going to spend is a complete waste of money, but you have no choice because we're in the middle of a cold spell. You cannot shut your building down for 3 days to replace your boiler. We can do a repair. It will be temporary, and you'll still have to replace your boiler in the spring. So I did the job, and the bill was $5,000. I gave him the bill, and he refused to pay. He refused to pay. It's too much money. I'm not paying. So I took him to Din Torah. And at the Din Torah, he says, I never gave him the go-ahead. I never told him to do it. And I also have no hana from it whatsoever because it ended up I have to replace the boiler anyway. So they asked him, but you didn't have hana? I mean, it was in February. He said, no, I replaced the boiler right away in February. I didn't have hana one day. So the Bezdin was smart. It was Rabbi Hoshan there, Rabbi Shoichet, and Rabbi Hoshan and Rabbi Shoichet. I forgot who the third dine was. And they said, you know what? Sit right here in Bezdin. I want the phone number to the superintendent of the building. And they made him stay there. They went out of the Dintire and they called the superintendent. And they asked the superintendent, after the boiler was fixed, how long was it there till it was replaced? He said, well, it was replaced in May. So it was there for February, for March, and for April. So they came back and told this, my Baldin, you're a liar. You said that you have to replace the boiler the next day anyway, which is sheker v'chosef. You had a null from the boiler for 4 months. So they said you're entitled to the lesser of the two, the benefit or what you expensed. So they asked me, do you have a list of invoices, how much it costed you? And I did. And it was about $4,000, or it was about $4,000. And they said, okay, we shot up that he benefited around $4,000. So they paskined that the benefit that he had was equal at least to the cost, and they made him pay me $4,000. But that's mamish this psak. They considered me a yard, and then they told me after the entire Yosy, by the way, when you deal with people like this, you got to get it in writing. Like I knew they knew who he was, because when we came to the entire, the Dayanim first said, okay, Yosy, this is how the entire works. This happens and that happens, and they gave me their whole rundown. Then they turned to him, you know already. So we saw that he'd been there before. Anyway, to his credit, I asked the Bezin to make him pay me on the spot, and he said, I will pay them on the spot. We went straight to his office, and he paid us on the spot. Anyway, that's the first interesting thing. The second interesting thing is that Rabbi Zilberstein brings down on this Gemara and the fascinating story how when you're hiring a worker, what you make up is very relevant. For instance, what is the halacha if you hire a worker and during the day while he's working, he finds a diamond? Who's entitled to that diamond? You, because you hired him for the day, or the worker because you didn't hire him for that. So the Gemara tells us, I think above a Mitzia, that if you told him when you hired him, work for me today, then everything he does is yours, and if he found that diamond, it's your diamond. But if you say, I want you to plow my field today, and while he was plowing, he saw a diamond, that's not yours. So the case that came to him was a very fascinating case. We all remember there was a tragedy years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, where in the middle of a wedding, the wedding hall collapsed. And the photographer who was taking pictures of the wedding also was there front row center getting detailed pictures of the collapse. And there were news agencies all over the world that were willing to pay him thousands of dollars for those pictures, as well as the investigation. We were willing to pay him thousands of dollars for those pictures. And the Baal Simcha said, you were working for me tonight. Those are my pictures, and you're going to pay me. So I had a chuckle when I heard this shaila, because today even your own wedding pictures aren't yours, because they put them up on the site and you have to order the pictures from them. You're only paying them for their time. You don't even own those pictures. But I'll call upon them. That was the shaila. The Baal Simcha said they're my pictures, and I make the money selling them to the media, and the photographer said they're his pictures. So it depends on what the photographer was hired for. So first what Zilberstein said is that when you hire a photographer to take pictures about your wedding, if something funny happens, like we know the famous story where the photographer got a picture of one mechutin pickpocketing the other mechutin, right? You want those pictures. Or if something goes, so you're not just hiring him for the Chatan Kala portraits, you want to get the whole picture. So maybe that's included, this accident. But then Rabbi Zilberstein said it's not true. Because first of all, it's when you're in a hall collapse, if you're a regular photographer, you run for your life. No photographer is getting paid enough to stay and risk his life in a collapsed building to take pictures. So clearly that was not included in his contract, and that he stayed to take pictures are his. So that's what Rabbi Zilberstein ended up passing. But you do see that you have to analyze what the typical agreement is in order to assess who owns the fruits of that labor. Okay, Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Iboilu. Baal shemocher kakar lepeir. We know a husband in Nichsim Alug owns the pairs. So if he owns the pairs, what if he sold that right to somebody else to have those pairs? Ma what the lacha? Mi amrinon madekani akni. He owned the rights to have those pairs, and therefore he has a right to sell that. Idilma ki takinu le rabbanon peiros lebaal. Why did the rabbanon give the peiros to the Baal? That's only mishum revach beisa, because we want the house to be full of parnasa and full of food, which ultimately benefits his wife. But selling it so he could pocket the money, that in no way benefits the wife, and therefore he does not have a right to sell. But to sell so that he can pocket the cash, that's not the deal at all. So there was a machlokes what Rava paskin. Yehuda Mar Bar Marei Mar Mishmei de Rava said, Omar Mashas Osi. His sale is valid, and therefore the Lakech gets to take those payers. But Rav Papa said that's not what Rava said. Rav Papa Amar Mishmei de Rava is also like it's not a good sale. Omar Rav Papa said, I'm right, and Yehuda Mar Bar Marei is wrong, because Yehuda Mar Bar Marei never heard Rava paskin that it's a good sale. He saw a different psak that Rava made, and from that he deduced that Rava would hold that it's a good sale. But he misunderstood the whole situation. Rava never said beferish that it's a good sale. Now this story, do not try this at home. There was a woman, the Aila Legaber Trey Amhasa. She brought in as Nixim Aluk 2 goites to service her, to clean the home. Now, who's entitled to the Maisi Adayim, to the cleaning services of these women? The husband, because it's Nixim Aluk. What did he do? Also, Gavra, this husband went, he married a second wife. He took 1 goite from his first wife and he gave her to the second wife. Oh, all hell broke loose. Often, like I made the Rava, this first wife came to Rava screaming, Savcha, she screamed, how could you let my husband take such advantage of me, to take my goat and give it to my tzara? How are you talking? Loy askafah. Rava did not engage her at all, he ignored her. Meaning, her time was no good. So when Rabbi Yehuda saw this, he thought, oh, I know why Rava didn't take her seriously. Mandachaza, Savar thought wrongfully, Mishum de Savar Mashal Shahasid. It's because Rava held that the husband has a right to do whatever he wants with the services of a Nixon alone. But Veloy, Zokar Papa, that was a wrong assessment of what Rava did. I'll tell you why Rava did ignore it. Mishum Ravach Beisa, Ravach. The whole problem of him selling Paris is because it's going to impact the home. There won't be Paris. So really Rava holds that he's not allowed to sell the Paris because the house is going to lose Paris. I over here by the Goita, they're living in the same house. So big deal, she's working for her instead of for her. Ultimately, the house will be cleaner. The house will be better serviced. So really, Rava would not allow him to sell Paris because we want Ravach Beisa. But having 2 imaris working for 2 different wives, that will not impact the house. It'll still deliver the same cleanliness, and therefore Rava didn't engage her taina. But Avadi held not allowed to sell Paris. The Hilchot so what halacha l'maisa? Baal shemachar karka leParis loy otzav v'loy. Halacha l'maisa is he cannot sell the Paris. My timer. So we had one svara of Rafka. We want the house to be full of Paris. But Abaye said a different answer, a different svara. He said chayshina and shema taxif. Everybody knows if you have a nice car, you're not going to slam the gas down to the floor and rip it with it because you don't want to wear out the engine. But if you have a rental car, then you're not going to be so gentle on the rental car. A person will be much harsher and rougher on the rental car than he will be on his own car. So Huadin is someone who rents a field for the year to take payers from it. He will be very hard on that field and he'll damage the field. So Zoktabaye, the reason why he's not allowed to sell the Paris is not because he can't sell the Paris. Technically he could. But the problem is we're very protective over her principal. And we don't want to allow her principal to be exposed to a potential damage. Rava says no, because we want the Paris in her household. My Beinayu, what's the difference if the reason why he can't sell is because we want the Paris in her household or because we're worried that the field will get damaged? Zoktamah, there's 3 differences. What if this property was very close to the city and they were able to check on it regularly? So there's no concern that the buyer would damage the field. But the fact is, we're still not going to have the Ravach Beit, we're not going to have the Paris in the house. So according to Rava, the sale would not be valid. But according to Abaye, the sale would be valid because we've mitigated the problem of the Lokeach damaging the field. Inamid Baal Arsu. What if the Baal Taka sold the Paris to a third party? But the third party is merely an investor. Who's the person who's actually going to work the field? The husband himself. We know he won't allow the field to be damaged. So there again, according to Abaye, you would be able to sell because the field is protected. But according to Rava, you don't have Ravach Beisa. We're still not bringing the fruits home, so you would not be allowed to sell. Inami Zuzi v'Ka'avid Buiska. Or on the flip side, what if the husband took the money from the proceeds of the Paris and he invested it, and the money that came in went into the household? Now there's no problem with Ravach Beisa because any money that he's giving up in the Paris, he's making up with the fund that he's investing from the Paris. But if we're worried about the field being damaged, according to Abaye, there would still be a problem. Beautiful. Now we just have one Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah, and then we're going to be done for today. You have a woman, Rachman Litzlan, who her husband died without children, and she's waiting for her brother-in-law to do evil. She's in between. And in between, someone died, and she yarshined nechasim. Is she allowed to sell those nechasim? So we already had a Mishnah earlier that discussed it, Bishas Erisin, Bishas Nesuin. So now we're discussing between two marriages. So Moedin B'Shamai, so Shemoichras, Shemoicheres, V'Nesenes V'Kain. She's allowed to sell, and it's a good sale. Mesa, what if she dies in this situation? So she's sort of in limbo. She is connected to her husband, but she's also connected to her family. So Ma Yasu, how do they distribute her Yerusha? B'Ksubasa, U'V'Nechasim, and Nechnosim V'Yotzinim. What do you do with her Ksuba, meaning the mana or Masayim of a Ksuba that she was entitled to when her husband died? And what about her Nichsei Maluk, the properties that she brought into the marriage with her? What happens with those? Who yarshins those? So they both sort of have a claim on it because the Yorshe Baal still have a claim on it because she's still Zokak Evil, but the Yorshe has a claim on it as well. So since it's sort of in limbo between these two people, they split the Yerusha. Rashi tells us some information. The Yavamis Beperach HaCholis. Kamafarish, the Gemara explains a big kasha that we have here on this Mishnah. Rashi doesn't share with us the details.
Who are the Yarshim? Who are the
Yorshe Av would be her father's family. So if her father was alive, it would be his father. If her father wasn't alive, the next of kin might be her brothers, might be her uncles.
Oh, yeah. I make beet salads.
So the Gemara in Yevamah says, has a kasha. This woman, if this woman was in limbo and her husband had some type of grasp, authority over her properties, why is it if she's alive, moicheres v'nesenes v'kayim? So Frek Rashi, which is the Gemara in Yevamah, asks, Ma'ishna Reisha, Kashi Kayemes, when she's alive, the light pligi, she'ein loy koyach behem. Nobody argues, everybody agrees that her husband's side has no shlita whatsoever on her properties. And suddenly when she dies, everything changes. U'ma'ishna Sefer Kashamesa, Amru Beishama Yachloiku Yorshe Baal behem. So that's the first kasha that Rashi says the Gemara asks in Yevamah and deals with in Yevamah. Rashi's not getting into the details over here. And another important piece of information that Rashi shares with us from Yevamah is Meforish Nami, the Dafka Nokat Yachloku Yorshe Av and Yorshe Av ben Nichsei Malug. It's Dafka the Nichsei Malug where they split it. Avol Yorshe Av lo Yachloku b'Ksubas Abal. But the Mana and Masayim, the Yorshe Baal keep. That's something that the husband never paid out yet, and they get to keep it. The Mishnah specifically says Mayatsu b'Ksubasa. So isn't Beishamai addressing what they do with their ksuba as well? Zok the Gemara Tanya v'Shafta. The question was originally about the ksuba, but Beishamai's response is not referring to ksuba at all. That's Beishamai Shita. You take each of the three asset classes, and there's three asset classes. There's Nichzei Tzoin Barzel, where the husband keeps them, but they're assessed when she comes into the marriage. And let's say they're assessed at $100,000. So if the marriage ends, he has to give her $100,000. That's Nichzei Tzoin Barzel. We have the Ksuba of Manu Masayim, and we have Nichzei Maluk. So you look at each asset class separately. We still have Nechasim Bechaskasam. The Nichzei Tzoin Barzel stay in the chazaka of who they're with, and Rashi will explain who that is. Uksuba, the mon and Messiah is becheskes Yerush Abal. They keep that completely, and the chazam and nechnasim v'yotzim mima, and her nitzim alog is becheskes Yerush Av. That goes to the Yerush Av. So let's see what it means. Ksuba becheskes Yerush Abal. I'm sorry. Let's see what it means. Nechasim. We still are in nechasim. So Rashi says it's referring to the asset class of tzoyin barzel becheskasim. What is becheskasim? So Rashi, it's a machloikis in Bava Basra. Bava Basra perik mishameis mefarish becheskes miyeh muchroken. Who do we say are the muchsokin on the nichtet tzoyin barzel? I becheskes Yerush Abal. Maybe the Yerush Abal are muchsokin. Ho be'acheruzin Allah, since they're responsible to pay for its full value when the marriage ends. So that means it's in their domain. Or maybe, since it was her karka, originally, it's in the chazaka of her yarsha. So we don't know what that means. It's a machloikis in Bava Basra. Okay, so that talks about Rahman al if she dies, when she's a Shemer Shavim, how they distribute her assets. Now we have a new case. Hiniach achiv mois. What's the halacha if she dies? I'm sorry, not if she dies. She's alive. Her husband dies, and she's following Tiyibum. And her husband left over cash. Now we know the halacha is if someone makes Yibum on the wife, he doesn't have to make his own nuksuba. He steps into his brother's ksuba. So all of his brother's assets are mishubed to pay off her ksuba. His personal assets that he has are not mishubed to her ksuba. So what happens if the brother left over cash? We need to protect those assets because we're going to soon see that the halacha is that the surviving brother who does yibum is not allowed to liquidate or touch any of his brother's assets. They have to remain fully intact. He's not allowed to sell them. They have to remain fully intact to be able to pay her ksuba should their marriage terminate. So what if her husband left cash? The halacha is yilokach ben karka. They'll buy property with that cash. But who will payers? And her new husband will eat the payers, but the land must be protected to give her money for her ksuba. How about payers atlushim in akarka? What if there's payers that are disconnected from the ground, which is just like cash? It's regular metaltlin. It has the same rule. Yilokach ben karka, who will payers, and he can eat payers. The Mishnah, the last Mishnah we discussed this lagabe her nichta maluk who belongs to. Now we're discussing protecting her assets, protecting his assets, protecting her first husband's assets, so that they should be available for her to claim from them if she needs to claim her ksuba. So I'm a chubar bekarka. What if the deceased brother left over property that had fruits on it? So Amar Meir said, you don't just let the new husband, the brother, the miyabah, take those fruits. No, because those fruits are now assets that belong to the deceased brother that have to be locked up to be protected to give her ksuba should she need to claim it. So therefore, you do the same thing that we discussed in last mission. You see what the value
I don't understand all this. He let his ksuba was $200 or $2,000 or $20,000. He left over real estate that's worth $500 million. They can't sell any of the karka.
That's correct. That's correct.
Because
even though the value of his assets are worth so much more than the small bit of ksuba that he'll be liable for, to protect the almana, we don't let him liquidate anything, even though it's vastly more than they could ever need for the ksuba. That's correct. We do it to protect her. Because you have to understand, she's at a disadvantage. When a woman is married to her first husband, all of his assets are meshubit, every single bit. That gives her a sense of security. Now that she's married to her second husband, all of his assets are not meshubit. So she doesn't have much security. He could divorce her and his assets are not liable at all to pay her ksuba. That makes her feel very insecure. So because of that, we beef up the security that she has. And we don't allow him to sell any assets at all, even if they're vastly more valuable than what the ksuba is, because we want her to have the extra sense of security since she's losing the sense of security of all of her husband's assets being meshubah to her. So what happens?
Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. I mean,
That's
the halacha has to make sense. And
The
this
halacha is the
definitely
halacha
doesn't
shows
make-
that we want her to have an extra special sense of security.
Okay,
It's more than normally the halacha is if a woman's married to a man, all of his nechasim are meshubah to pay the ksuba, but he's allowed to sell property. Now, if there won't be enough money to pay off the ksuba, she'll be able to take it away from the lekufas. But he's allowed to sell his property. But when it's his brother's property, he's not even allowed to sell it, even though it can be reclaimed. We actually make it sit there because we want to make her feel secure. So Zok the Gemara, what do? Amar Meir, Shavin Nois and Kamen and Yafin Bepayers, the Chamen and Yafin Beloy Payers, and that value has to be put into a Karen. Vamoiser Yilogach Ben Karka, Who Oichel Payers. And once again, that's part of the Karen that gets put into a piece of property. Her new husband needs the payers, but the property is secured for her ksuba. The Chacham say, similar to what we had when she has nichs in the lub, payers are mechubar bekarka shaloi. Anything that's mechubar bekarka when she goes into the marriage, he gets to take as payers and a tlushu in the karka. But if they're loose payers, they're not automatically hers. They're not automatically part of his estate. Rather, kol hakodim zocha behen. Whoever gets them first gets them. Kodem hu, if he grabs them, as soon as his brother dies, zocha, they're his and he gets to keep them. Kod mehi, but if she gets them, then they're not hers, they're her late husband's, but we consider them part of his estate, and therefore you look up and karka v'loichel pairs. All she can claim is that they should buy karka with it to protect the principal, and any pairs that comes from there, her second husband's entitled to. Kansa. What happens once someone makes yibum? Then now this woman is like his wife completely. The Gemara is going to explain what that means. We had it in Yavamis. The only difference between a regular wife and a Yavama is that a regular wife, all of your assets are leaned to pay off her ksuba. By Yibum, none of your assets are leaned to pay off her ksuba. Rather, only the assets that you took over from your brother, only those assets are leaned for her ksuba. And therefore, so this is what Rebel suggested. Let him take a diamond that's worth 10 times her ksuba, put it on the table, and tell his wife, here, this diamond is more than enough to cover you for your ksuba. You can hold on to it, and let me sell the properties. Relinquish your right to prevent me from selling the properties. You're secure. You have a diamond here that's worth way more than your ksuba. Like Rebel said, it's worth $500 million. Let me sell the properties. Zok to Mishnah, you cannot do that. Lo yomer lo harei ksubasayach munachas al shulchan. Ela kol nechasav achrayin luksubasa. All of the nechasim that he arshins from his brother, that entire estate, is locked up, cannot be sold, and then must remain in his possession. Zok to Mishnah, the same thing applies to a regular woman. V'chein lo yomer adam leishtoi harei ksubasayach munachas al shulchan. You can't tell your wife, what is the ksuba? 50,000? Here's a diamond that's worth $1 million. I want you to release the rest of my assets from the lien because you have enough security with this diamond. Again, you can't do that. The wife's entitled to that full security. All of his assets are liened to pay off the ksuba. Girsha, what if he made yibum and then he divorced her? Allah is ein lo elo ksuba. All she gets is her ksuba. Basically, he pays her off her ksuba, and all of the nechasim are now free of a lien. What if it's zero? What if he then took her back and married her again? Then arei kechol anoshim, she's like any other wife. Ve'ein lo elo ksuba v'lvad, she only gets ksuba. Rashi says, what does this mean? Harei kechol anoshim. Ditnam bepirkin lachamon, we learned later. Hamagar says ishtoi v'chsira al manas ksuba rishon nechsir. Now, to show what this case is, but one shot in the Gemara is a man divorced his wife, and before he had a chance to pay off her ksuba, he took her in again. So he doesn't have to write up a new ksuba for her. Rather, the original ksuba that he had from the first marriage remains intact. And that's her ksuba. There's no new ksuba. But the Gemara will elaborate on this tomorrow, Bez Hashem. So we'll stop here. We'll be mamshech tomorrow. We're going to learn tomorrow after Shacharis, after Ataras Nadorim, after Red First Bulls, which will probably be around 9 o'clock. That's when we're going to learn.
It won't be around 9 o'clock. It'll be closer to 10 o'clock.
Okay, it'll be closer to 10 o'clock. We'll mention we'll learn, but whenever it works out, when we're done with Ataras Nadorim, we'll learn and mention we're going to learn. We'll probably be learning on this channel as well, because probably Donnie Finkel saying here tomorrow morning as well. We'll see. I'll send that on WhatsApp where we're going to learn depending on what's available.
Okay.
You're davening the main minyan 6:30.
Yeah. Okay. Good to luck, everybody.
Nice.
Good
I
fun.
want to give you an update on what's happening with the for those who don't know what's happening next door to the shul.